Veteran on the Move, episode number 10. Welcome to Veteran on the Move, your pathfinder to freedom. If you're a transitioning veteran, an entrepreneur wannabe, or someone who's still stuck in that job trying to escape, this podcast is dedicated to your success. So welcome aboard, sit back, and enjoy the ride. Hey everybody, this is Joe Crane. Veteran on the Move has made it to episode number 10. Really appreciate you listening to the podcast, and I'd love to hear what you have to say about it. I'd appreciate it if you could go into iTunes and leave us a review and tell us what you think about the podcast. So enjoy episode number 10 with Scott Fussell. Scott Fussell spent 4.5 years serving as a Tank Platoon Leader, Tank Company Executive Officer, Battalion Maintenance Officer, and Assistant Operations Officer in the Army. Since leaving the Army in 1999 as a captain, he's worked with global and Fortune 500 companies in a variety of roles to include Six Sigma Master Black Belt, Plant Manager, and Marketing Manager. Scott is now the host of Command Your Business podcast, helping military veteran entrepreneurs take command of their business. All right, Scott, thanks for being on the podcast. And I've given everybody a little bit of an intro and your background. If you could cover what a little bit of your Army career was like.
Yeah, so I, after college, I did the ROTC thing, going through the University of Tennessee, and got commissioned as a second lieutenant in the Army. And I served as an armor officer for about 5.5 years in the mid to late 90s. So I'm a pre 9/11 veteran. So I served as a Tank Platoon Leader, Tank Company XO, staff officer, operations officer. Did that for about 5.5 years, and then I left the Army early 1999. Flew back from Kuwait and left about 2 weeks later.
Can you tell us what your transition was like?
It was a pretty quick transition. My unit was deploying on a rotation. This was again pre 9/11, but to a like Operation Desert Fox or something pre-Iraq. Saddam was doing something, so we sent a couple battalions over, and we were already scheduled to go over for a intrinsic action rotation, which the Army did a lot. So I agreed to go over for a couple of months prior to getting out. So typically, the typical transition at the time out of the Army, you had a month and a half to get everything ready. I had about 2 weeks. So I went through very quickly, did kind of all the out processing that all your listeners know. It probably hasn't changed much since then, and started working with some military recruiters. The junior or the recruiters that were focusing on junior military officers at the time were really ramping up and doing a good job of placing people at the time. So I went through a couple of conferences and got placed with a GE subsidiary and started doing, their Six Sigma program. And it was a pretty good transition. I was fortunate when I went to that company that they hired heavily in the junior military officer rank. So it was a very fortunate time for me, because literally I was surrounded by 15 other people doing the exact same thing that I was doing as a Six Sigma black belt. Six Sigma Master Black Belt is what the role was called. But there were literally 15 of us, Army, Navy, Air Force guys, all working together right after I transitioned.
And so you didn't really have much time before you actually EAS'd to prepare. You pretty much on the street and jumped right into something right away.
Yeah, I mean, it was a very short time span. Based on when I was getting out, I ended up selling my leave back, so I didn't really even go on terminal leave. But I had a little bit of a couple of months of savings built up from when I sold that leave back. So literally, right when I got out, I started going to hiring conferences. Went through 2 or 3 different hiring conferences, and then was fortunate to get hired with this GE company, and that's kind of how my civilian career started.
And so tell us a little bit about your civilian career and your career progression over the last several years.
I've been fortunate. I did those couple of roles, was able to to move up pretty quickly. Did several different things at the time. E-business was just becoming popular. This was again early 2000s. Became an e-business project manager. Transitioned to another company, and then I went to work after that with my current company, which is I'm not going to say my day job, who the company is, but it's a Fortune 500 company. I started working in one of their manufacturing plants. Did that for about 2.5 years, and then transitioned into a plant manager role. And I've did that for about 4 years, and now I've transitioned, from that role. Not necessarily a natural progression, but I've transitioned into marketing since then. And I think that's one of the things that really benefited me from my military career is being able to learn. And that's something, having a podcast and talking to other military veteran entrepreneurs, one of those common traits that I always hear about is that ability to learn. That's why people in the Army are successful, because they're typically, or in the Army and the military in general. And that's not, the Army doesn't have sole ownership of that trait. Anyone in the military has that ability to learn. And I think the ones that are very successful really can just pick up and figure out what they need to do. I don't know if, you being a pilot may have been a little bit different, but other than my initial training at my officer basic school, most of my roles in the Army since then were OJT. I had to figure it out. Hey, you're now going to go be a tank company XO. You go figure it out. You need to hit the ground running and be able to figure it out. Same thing for maintenance officer, operations officer, and I think that ability to learn is what has allowed me to be successful.
And training is training, and jobs are jobs, regardless of what you did in the military. But the most important thing is the leadership, and that's what it really takes to bring people together and to actually get the job done and accomplish the mission.
Without a doubt, I think that just the ability in whatever level you are in the military, just that the responsibility you have at such an early age, and those leadership traits that are instilled in you, just have something that I've used every day since. I mean, I fall back on what I learned as a young cadet and young second lieutenant, first lieutenant captain. I fall back on that every day.
And I think a lot of veterans experience it when they first come home from boot camp or basic training, and they get around their family and their buddies back on the block, and they realized in just a few weeks or a couple months of that immersion, how much they've changed and how much everybody else has stayed the same. That I remember coming back from my first round of training with the Marine Corps, and I didn't realize it, but I'd become somebody different, and I didn't realize it until I walked back in, came back on the block and was back home around my family and friends, and all of a sudden I realized, well, they haven't been doing anything while I've been gone working,
Yeah, and I think I was listening to an interview you did the other day with Frank Gustafson,
Mm-hmm.
and really talking about, in such a short amount of time, I mean, you have so many experiences, regardless of whether you served in peacetime or when you served or how long you served. Just in a few short years, there is a lot of experiences, a lot of responsibility thrust upon you on a very short amount of time, and that's really valuable. I think I heard you saying it as I was listening to the podcast. You don't really realize, and a lot of veterans don't realize what skills they have compared to their peers that have been out in the civilian world.
And it's not to be misleading or to think that because you're some grand master and you're going to walk right into the great job because of that. It's just you got to keep in the back of your mind. You have skills, you have leadership ability, and go get that job or get into that first venture of yours, and then it'll become obvious to you, and you'll start to excel and pass others up once you're there. But you got to get started first when you first transition out. Now, have you did you have any? You're doing your podcast now, and have you messed around with very much in the way of entrepreneurship, or Did you have much in the way of entrepreneurial desires back when you were in the Army or first starting out in the civilian world?
It's probably a bug that's caught me late. It wasn't something that in the Army I ever thought that I would do. But after I got out and started working in the civilian world for a couple of years, I started getting intrigued by the internet, in its very early stages, what opportunities were out there. And, I probably for the last 10 years, I've probably dabbled in some small entrepreneurial ventures with, small niche sites, doing different things to make some money online. But probably early 2013 is when I kind of really got serious and got hooked on podcasting. I started listening to Pat Flynn. I'd kind of just flipped through and found my podcasting app on the iPhone and started listening to Pat Flynn, who's another great podcast from the Smart Passive Income. Started listening to basically everything he put out, which led me to another entrepreneur called John Lee Dumas from Entrepreneur on Fire. And I was just listening to John, connected with him. He was another Army veteran, and really talked about the opportunities that podcasting has compared to blogs and other sites that are out there. They're in the hundreds of millions and growing by leaps and bounds every day. Versus podcasts, there's a lot fewer people in podcasts today. It's a very deep connection. So I after hearing John, I decided that, I'm going to do a podcast. And, had become very, very interested in entrepreneurship and really tried to figure out what my unique angle was going to be. So I kind of focused on military veteran entrepreneurship, with my background in the Army and just seeing the drawdown coming with more and more people leaving the Army, leaving the Navy, the Marine Corps, the Air Force every day. The jobs are not going to be there for all of these people. Really, I think our veterans coming back are going to be the people that are going to create their own jobs in many cases and help continue to keep our economy strong.
Yeah, and I think, like back when I was a kid, I always had that curiosity and problem solving and trying to come up with that latest and greatest product mentality. Back then, we called it being an inventor. Of course, nowadays it's the word entrepreneur. But a lot of veterans might be intimidated or confused by the word entrepreneur. They probably think of Donald Trump or Richard Branson, one of those guys when they think of entrepreneur. But entrepreneurs are basically oftentimes just business owners and hardworking folks, just that are self-employed and doing their own thing. It's not all about the venture capital and inventing the next Facebook. So really trying to translate. Your podcast is very similar to Veteran on the Move. A lot of similarities. That's why I was excited to talk to you about what you're doing and what you've learned so far, because I really feel the need to almost translate to veterans what entrepreneurship is all about and how to get started, how to get involved in it. And a lot of what I'm covering is what I've learned on my own journey and my own transition into the world of entrepreneurship.
And it's exactly to your point. It's not just that building the next Facebook and venture capital. Most of the people that I talk to are building small businesses. They're not wanting to go and raise millions of dollars. They're wanting to bootstrap and build a lifestyle for themselves and build some security for themselves and their family, but they're not out there, to your point exactly. Don't think you have to go out there and understand how to code and do all these things to build the next Facebook. I mean, there are franchisees out there. I've interviewed people that are, starting a franchise, people that are doing all kinds of great things that don't involve any form of venture capital or any kind of huge investments at all.
Franchising is definitely a great option, and veterans have a tendency. Veterans are actually very successful in the franchise industry, and franchise companies are recruiting veterans, like crazy to get into the franchise business. So it's definitely a way to have somewhat of a cookie cutter product and business model already up and set for you, but yet you still get to run your own business. It's definitely a great way to go for somebody that's looking to get into business for themselves. And nowadays, like you mentioned, with whether it's podcasting or the internet and online things happening, there's really, I forget who it was the other day that said it. There's no better time almost in history to start a business than now.
Oh, I mean, without a doubt, you just look at the tools that are at your fingertip. 10 years ago, how difficult would it be for you and I to be sitting here talking over the internet, recording it, and being able to deliver this conversation, this podcast out to the world? It could have been done 10 years ago, but it would have been so difficult to do it. And I'm sitting here talking to you today on the $49 microphone that sounds pretty darn good for $49. And it's amazing what you can do. Putting up a website, you can do it for hosting for $3.95 a month. You can install a basic WordPress theme, and you can get up and running. There's VAs and virtual assistants out there that can help you. There's so many tools and so much information out there that to help you get started. That I agree 100%. Now is no better time.
Yeah, one of the downfalls of entrepreneurship, I guess you could say, is the next new shiny object. It's especially on the internet. It's so easy to get distracted and jump at the next thing that comes across your desk. I don't know if you've experienced any of that in at least getting your podcast up and running.
Oh yeah, it's very easy to get caught up in that. I'm a gadget person in general. So, any cool new toys, that's, one of the things I miss about the military is all the cool toys you get to play with. But, anything that's out there, it's tough to try to just stay away from it and focus on what's important. And, one of the things that I've heard and I'm trying to practice is just being consistent, and continuing to deliver, focusing on something, and continuing to just be present and continue to do it. Because I've had people tell me in some mastermind groups before, it's like it's the people that are just going to continue to be doing this 5 years down the road that are going to win just because they haven't quit. There are going to be people that are going to try podcasting and try it for a month or two or whatever it is they're trying and quit because they don't have that immediate success, versus the people that are just willing to put their nose down and grind it out and continue to deliver, and not get intrigued by that shiny object and always kind of chasing that next important thing.
Yeah, no, one of the other pitfalls of entrepreneurship, especially coming out of the military, even in the civilian sector, if you have a boss, you got somebody who's setting the goals and establishing the course of action and establishing your mission. And when you got a mission, you know what to do. You go do it, and you know what needs to be done. But when you become an entrepreneur, especially if you're still searching for an idea, I mean, if you get your idea and you get your teeth into it, and you say this is what's going to happen, it becomes a little easier. But sometimes, even myself, I didn't realize how, getting out and being on my own, I don't have a problem getting up in the morning and working. It's not like I'm lounging around the house all day. But what I struggle with sometimes is, a lot of times, if you're alone, if you're a sole entrepreneur, you tend to wonder, am I doing right now? Am I doing what I'm supposed to be doing? Am I doing, am I maximizing my time? Is this the most important thing? Because when you've got a boss, it may not be what you want to do, but typically if you're doing what the boss wants you to do, you're going to be good. But when you're an entrepreneur, it's like, well, where am I going? And what is it I'm really supposed to be doing right now? Have you had some of the same struggles with your podcast?
Yeah, some of it is a challenge, and those struggles are, hey, I've been working, I've been doing research, and I've been looking around, and it's okay. Am I working on what's important too? Is that other thing, and trying to figure out, have I been searching on, all these posts or trying to find guests or searching and trying to tweak Facebook or Twitter? is that really the most important thing? And that is always a challenge. And one of the things that has been very beneficial to me is really connecting with other people just like myself, other entrepreneurs that are trying to do similar things online. And one of the things that has been super valuable to me is being part of a mastermind with a group of entrepreneurs, meeting every week, and you all have similar goals. So even though we're all solo entrepreneurs, we all push each other, challenge each other, give each other ideas. So working for yourself and being a solo entrepreneur in my mind doesn't mean that you have to work in a vacuum, and really getting out there and connecting with people and finding people that can help hold you accountable, help give you ideas has been really, really
valuable. There's nothing better than to have somebody, a like-minded person to bounce ideas off of, or even just a reality check once in a while. I actually went through the Army ACAP separations classes on Fort Leavenworth because I was on the staff at the Army's Command General Staff College, even though I'm a Marine. That's where I retired out of. And after the standard stuff, I saw that they had an entrepreneur workshop. So I jumped all over that. And I was in this workshop for 2 days, surrounded by about a dozen other people that all wanted to be entrepreneurs. And there were military folks in there from all the services. And there were even a few spouses in there that were wanting to do it. And just being able to talk entrepreneurship and my ideas and hear their ideas. Matter of fact, it was about a year ago. And a couple of days ago, I actually interviewed a guy, Colin Taylor, that I met in an entrepreneur workshop during my ACAP class. And he's become an author and a poet since he retired from the Army. And just being around the same kind of people, that was my first experience with, I actually, there are people out there that think like this. And because in the military, it's almost shunned, or it's, self-serving to be thinking like that and talking about going into business or trying to make money somehow outside the Army or outside whatever service you're in. And I experienced quite a bit of that. A lot of it was self-induced, of course, but you just didn't want to let your comrade in arms know that you have an interest in business, or you have an interest in actually, going out there and starting a business and making money and thinking outside the realm of your tactical mission per se.
Yeah, and you get people looking at you kind of crazy that, even once, even if you're planning on doing your 20, 25 years and retiring, and then you talk to your peers about going and starting a business, most of the people will probably look at you like you're just crazy. Like, you're not going to go and work for the government and get a government service job and add on to your retirement. And I just want to touch on a little bit on something we were just talking about, is that connecting with people just like you as well. There are some awesome programs out there that can connect you with other veteran entrepreneurs. I went to, in May, TechStars Patriot Boot Camp, which is put on by a group called TechStars. So for any veterans that are in the entrepreneurial and the online or the digital space, it is a fabulous program. I would check out TechStars. The Syracuse University, the Institute for Military and Veteran Families, has a couple of great boot camps. Inc. Magazine has a military entrepreneur event. I got to go to one in DC. If you're in the DC area, kind of keep an eye out for what they're doing. But there are some, and there's plenty of others out there that want to help you connect with other veterans even. So veterans that A, get your background, get what you're all about, and B, you're also kind of in that space just like you were in your transition class. That's a huge, huge resource. And again, going to those things have been very
and
valuable
usually
to me.
You got to get to one of those events or get involved in one of those clubs or whatever they are. And from there, it'll just expand if you stay with it and follow it. So there are a lot of phenomenal, great programs out there. And a lot of these universities or other organizations that put on these boot camps, they put them on for not only just military folks, but civilians too. but oftentimes there's ways for veterans to attend them for free. And some of them even have you there for like several weeks, and it's room and board. You come during the summer when the dorms are empty, and there's just phenomenal programs. There's so many out there, you can't even really list them, but there's a lot of veterans that don't realize they're there. So
just do a little research, because there are so many, and I know you've talked about this on the podcast before, Joe, but there are so many people out there, civilians, veterans, otherwise, that want to see our veterans coming off active duty really, really succeed.
Yeah, and they're definitely, you can't look at it like a handout, because that's not what they want. It's more like a hand up. They want you to come, they want you to get something out of it, and then they want you to turn around and go out and produce, and make everybody proud. So, veterans have been serving their country and fighting, and a lot of guys have died and had serious injuries in the last 12 years of war. And I view it as, I owe it to those that didn't get to come back to produce, to be fruitful, and to go make something happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think and honestly, our country needs them to. It's very important that they come back. I mean, our economy is not growing at the rate that there are going to be jobs for everyone. But we need our veterans to come back, and many of them to come back and start businesses and create jobs, not only for themselves, but for their fellow veterans and other people within the country. Because, we need it for our country to continue to be successful. And, one of the people that I recently interviewed is a Marine veteran, and he works at the Kauffman Foundation.
Yeah, John Robinson. And I've met him. I know who he is.
Yeah, John is great, and he was one of the speakers at TechStars Patriot Boot Camp, and he had a great quote during his talk at TechStars Patriot Boot Camp. Was, it was that your service doesn't end at when you get your DD 214. Your service isn't over. We need you to continue to serve, and I thought that was very, very powerful.
Yeah, that's another program that's phenomenal. It happens to be here in Kansas City area where I'm at, the Kauffman Foundation, who John Robinson works for. But the Kauffman Foundation is not just about entrepreneurship in the Kansas City area. They're going around. John travels all around the country to colleges, universities, and communities, trying to give people money, essentially, and giving speeches to try to foster entrepreneurship in other parts of the country. And the Kauffman Foundation is even reaching out to other parts of the world too. It's going way beyond the Midwest.
Yeah, it's a phenomenal, just from what I've seen, and it's not, just specifically for veterans, it's for anyone, but they just pointed us to some great online resources they have. I'm sure within your area, in the Kansas City area, they have the 1 Million Cups program, where every Wednesday veterans, or not veterans, but any entrepreneur can get together at these events, and someone talks about their business. So they're doing some. Oh yeah,
as a matter of fact, it was during that ACAP entrepreneur workshop that I heard about 1 Million Cups. I'd never heard of it before. And the very next week, I was in downtown Kansas City attending my first 1 Million Cups event, and it's phenomenal. It was, again, talk about being in a room with a dozen other entrepreneurial-minded people. Go to a 1 Million Cups meeting and be in an entire room full of entrepreneurial-minded people and hear entrepreneurs talking about their business and where they're at and their trials and tribulations and successes. And so I was on a string I was down there every Wednesday morning going to every event. And then I had to transition back into my civilian job there for a few months and trying to run the podcast too. But I try to get to 1 Million Cups events whenever I can. It's I'll never get tired of them.
And I think they even do some online as well. So even if your city doesn't have one, you can go and watch some of these.
They do.
Online.
It's simulcast, so you can watch it live, or you can watch the previous ones recorded. And they're expanding all across the world. It's not just in the United States, but they're expanding. So if there's not a 1 Million Cups event going on near you, then contact the Kauffman Foundation, or you can just Google 1 Million Cups and contact them. And start one yourself, because they're looking to expand and get this concept an idea for entrepreneurship spread all around the world. They've got 30 to 40 cities right now, I believe, and I think they've even got some in a couple other countries.
No, that's awesome.
Well, all right, Scott, it's great talking to you. Go ahead and wrap this up. We're almost out of time. And again, I appreciate you being here. It's great talking about your podcast, Command Your Business. Find him there in iTunes or at commandyourbusiness.com. And good luck with your entrepreneurial ventures, and I wish you the best of luck and success.
Well, thank you much, Joe. I really enjoyed it, and I can't wait to see where you take Veteran on the Move.
Okay,
next.
Great. And we'll be in touch. So I'm out.
Awesome.
Thank you for listening to Veteran on the Move, your pathfinder to freedom. If you like the show, leave us a review on iTunes. Reviews are always greatly appreciated. So until next time, this veteran is Oscar Mike.